Hey, and welcome to this jazz guitar lesson. We're going to take a look today at All of Me, and we're going to take a look at the ways you can work with scales and work towards making music with them, rather than sort of, being like, okay, I've got this, I've got this, and this. But how do I start to say something with it? So I'll show you some tips on how you can work towards coming up with your own phrases from those scales. If you're new here, my name's Andy and I do jazz guitar lessons every Wednesday and Saturday. Be sure to hit that subscribe button to not miss any of my future videos. Hit that bell notification too. On to today's video. So we're going to take the first 8 bars of All of Me, which is C6, E7, A7, D minor 7. Just using that small bit of the tune just because we can more easily sort of work with the small section and break things down a bit more. So what scales would I use for those chords? I'd use C Ionian, so the C major scale, E Phrygian dominant, which is the A harmonic minor but from E to E, A Phrygian dominant, which is the D harmonic minor from D to D, D harmonic minor. There's obviously many other scales you can use. Those are the ones we're going to work with today. Now that's all very well, and you'll encounter that advice a lot. Oh, use that scale here, use that one there. But we've already got 4 scales, and we're 8 bars in. What if we do the other remaining bars up to 32 bars? How many more scales are we going to need? And it's just a lot of information. And you need to get to grips with the sound of the individual pieces of information, those individual scales, because they all have like their own DNA, if you like, their own intervals. For instance, the Phrygian dominant that we're using on the E7 and the A7, they share the same intervals. Root, flat 9, major 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th. We've got this minor 6th there, and then we've got the flat 7 and the back to root. Same in this one. Exactly the same intervallic structure, so it has the same sound quality, although be it with different notes, because it's A rather than E Phrygian dominant. Sometimes this kind of approach with all these scales can be a bit overwhelming, and it can be hard to know what to do other than to play the scale at the right time, kind of going like this. I just did there, just playing the scales, kind of 8th note rhythm, up and down. It's all very well, it's all good, and it's definitely worth being able to do, provided you know the notes you're playing each time and you know the intervals, because that's transferable. The intervallic construction of a scale is really important. Say for instance, knowing that a major scale is tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone is transferable. Start the same formula from a different note and you get the major scale from whatever note you started on. So if you know the formulas intervallically for these scales, you can more easily transfer them. And then say E Phrygian dominant doesn't just become something you can use on an E7, because you could move it for F7 or C7 and so forth. I think to play like this you have to study it, so maybe getting your book, either a manuscript book or just a pad, and writing these things out so you can really get them clear in your head. Some people are blessed with a wonderful memory and can retain it all. I had to kind of write these things down as I went along, just to kind of make it easier for me to remember. And again, things you can do without a guitar, which is useful. What I would do to really get used to a scale and start to work out ideas with it is not to play all of it. So if we just played the first 3 notes, and that's a very simple idea to hear. If I descended that same idea, so go 3rd note of each scale, 2nd note, then the 1st note. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, it gets a bit predictable, but it's going to help you hear things over that scale. Once you can work with 3 notes, you could obviously work with 4, but 5's a nice number to work with. So 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. More manageable than the 7. And then what you can try to do with that smaller amount, which is easier to hear than all of it. You know, sing it. Da 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 ba da 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 da. Down as well. Try and hear that, and then you can try and come up with small melodies within that 5-note pull. Using the same rough idea. And I can hear things easily because I've worked with that small pull. And then what I would suggest you do, either with the 3-note pull or 4 notes or 5 notes, is try to find those melodies that you can hear, hopefully, you know, against the chord. First keep going, play the different intervals within that, which are, you know, in C would be C, D, C, E, C, F, C, G. So obviously you don't have to start on C, and your next note doesn't have to be the second note. You know, you could go, which is 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Work that through. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ah, got caught out there. So as you can hear, as you do this kind of thing, you'll start to hear more, you know, so creating little melodies like that, they're very melodic, they're very, you know, lyrical in terms of quality, and for me, that's a great thing to aspire to be able to play with the changes to a song, something that's melodic, something that, you know, someone remembers. You know, you have to be creative and try to hear different melodies and sing them and make sure you're hearing them. Don't just play things because you know your fingers are in the right place. Trying to hear ideas and then translate it to the next scale. So whatever you come up with for C major, could you come up with it for the next 3 scales? It works well with helping you develop call and response, because obviously I have my C major call and do the same thing for the E7 scale. You've got 2 lines which respond well to each other, and you might subtly change the second one maybe to make it a variation. Maybe doing it a 3rd or a 4th time might be overkill, but I quite like repeating things in 3s, so maybe you might go there. I did the first 2 were the same, the 3rd one I varied it slightly, and then for the D minor I varied the phrase, but as you can hear there, you get ideas which follow on from one another, which is, you know, always a nice thing to have to a certain degree. So the takeaway really is, if you're faced with that thing where, you know, say if you wanted to play a song which does change key a lot, you can use arpeggios and a chord tone based approach, which is cool. But if you do want to follow the scale route, but you feel overwhelmed by the scales and you can't think, oh, how am I going to learn to say something with it? Because all you think of is when it comes to that chord is just, I've got that, and it is just a load of notes, you know, load of notes that you don't know what to say with, and it, for me, it comes down to is developing the ability to hear things to say, because at the minute that for you might just be 8, 10, 7, 8, 10, 8, 7, 9, 10, and if it's that, then, you know, you really need to work on learning your notes, hearing the sound, knowing the intervals. By working with smaller sections of the scale, just like 3 notes, like we started with, and you could do that. You know, you could do that starting on the 3. So they're going 3, 1, 5. So going 3, 1, 2, 2, 3, 4. Maybe then back to 1, 2, 3. Then maybe 3, 2, 1. Creating melodic ideas there with these little cells, if you like. The other thing you can get from this kind of practice is building up a scale in blocks. So going root to second, then root, second, third, then add the 4th and the 5th and then the 6th and the 7th, and you've got, you know, the complete scale. And I suppose the really obvious thing is really you don't have to work with all of the scale. It's easier to hear the, you know, the first few intervals first, by just working with small chunks and being restrictive. It will force you to be creative. You know, if you sit with, say, just the first, second, and third note of those 4 scales, then you know you'll soon wear out of the idea of going 1, 2, 3. You'll be like, oh, okay, it's a bit boring. What if I reverse it? What if I start on the 3rd? What if I start on the 5th? What if I put some rhythm or some technique in? What if I chromatically fill the gap between any of those notes? Like go root, flat 2. You can't do it with every scale, because if it's got a flat 2 you won't be able to fill the gap, but there'll be other gaps you can fill. But say C major, you could go, which is going C, C sharp, D, E, so putting in a C sharp between the C and the D. Or between the E and the D you could put E flat. You could experiment with things like that, providing you're hearing it. You can get a PDF of those scales if you need that over at my website, jazzguitarwithandy.com. Link in the description and in the pinned comment. Brings me to my final point, which is that, you know, this is a very active way of pursuing scales. It's not a very passive, just playing scales. It's sort of actively pursuing the idea of trying to craft things with it and find things within it. That's the thing, you know, you don't want to passively just sit and play scales and not, you know, if you're doing that, you're not probably going to take you anywhere. You need to actively pursue finding melodies and licks and ideas within them. If you've enjoyed today's video, why not check my video out on how to simplify your understanding of jazz standards, or if you want to learn another jazz standard, why not check out my video on Black Orpheus. Anyway, until next time, see you at the next lesson.